you notice out there leaders doing really well and in some cases maybe not doing so well?
What we're seeing right now is that the human ability to change is not keeping up with the pace of world change. We're facing unprecedented times. Nobody knows exactly what's going to happen. So based on that, people are in a position of swirling and uncertainty. In order for us to be effective at this time, we need to recognize that times aren't normal.
Welcome back to the Witz podcast. We are here with the one and only Jadine Cleary, high performance coach, magnificent facilitator, speaker, and someone that a lot of you have probably experienced in the room and worked with personally. And we're really excited to have the conversation today because it is a major topic today, which is what is this new world of leadership going to look like? One of the things we're going to talk about today are some of the key things that leaders need to be implementing and maybe also call it working on in order to be more effective. And, it has a lot to do with the human being. So, just give us a lay of the land. What do you notice out there leaders doing really well and in some cases maybe not doing so well?
Okay, so it is a new lay of the land, and I'm glad you bring that up because in order for us to be effective at this time, we need to recognize that the times aren't normal. So if we try to do what we normally do, we are not going to be effective. And what we're seeing right now is that the human ability to change is not keeping up with the pace of world change. So when you talk about what's happening, people right now are struggling on a micro level in terms of what's happening in their company, what's happening in their home, right? I just got off the phone with somebody who's talking about, I'm working from home full time, but my husband was laid off. So we're trying to navigate that new reality. So the micro level as well as the macro level. We're facing unprecedented times. Nobody knows exactly what's going to happen. So based on that, people are in a position of swirling and uncertainty. So more than ever, the strength and command of leadership is that much more important because people are looking for things to hold on to.
Yeah, so let's talk about a little bit of that because, I had a similar conversation with the group this morning, which is, how do they need to start showing up as leaders? And, in some cases, the exact skill sets that they've learned, the behaviors that have been promoted and supported in the past are actually quite contradictory to the success of teams and mental well-being today. So what do you think we need to start implementing as leaders?
And it's a really good point you bring up because those people that we look to be experts in business, to make those hard decisions, they're still required right now to make those hard decisions. And yet at the same time, they're being asked to be compassionate and they're being asked to understand how people are feeling and people are feeling stretched, right? How can I actually work two sides of my brain at the same time? So one thing we need to be aware of is we need to be making the difficult business decisions with our head. We can use those critical business skills to make those hard decisions, but then we need to communicate using our heart.
Yeah.
Right? We need to be able to communicate messages in a way that actually connects with people and has them feel like we're all on the same island together. It's not my island and your island.
I think to that's the one thing this pandemic has brought, that the comfort in the fact that this is everyone going through it, right? But some people are not communicating well, and I think it's really important, and I think you'll agree with this, that in a lot of cases, everything that you've learned as a leader is going to be tested in today's world, right? And we talk a lot about this, which is the human being, looking after the human being before the role. Doesn't mean, as you said, we can't make some of those hard business decisions because some of them are black and white decisions, but there's compassion in how we do so. So where do you think compassion fits in all of this? And what would you say to someone that might describe themselves as not compassionate?
Compassion needs to sit behind everything right now. And the reason it needs to sit behind everything is because human beings right now are struggling. We all only have a finite amount of energy that we can put towards things. And if our energy is being used in our home environments, trying to homeschool and trying to deal with changes at work, trying to deal with the fact that there's been perhaps layoffs on our team and now we have to do more work. There's so much energy going towards that. If leaders aren't also compassionate in how they deliver messages, then they're working with people who are going to be completely burnt out. So compassion has to lead. We need to now, as leaders, have the courage to lead with compassion and to understand that we're dealing with human beings first. And so often we talk about, as leaders, there's the technical components of what we need to do, and we need to underscore business. But we need to recognize it's people that will actually make those technical things come to fruition. So if we don't know how to connect with human beings where they're at, and we've talked a lot about connecting with people where they're at, then we'll miss that opportunity to connect, and then nothing's going to happen. Plus, we also know right now people are really raw. People are looking from their leaderships. We talk about their relationship economy. They're looking for their leaders to treat them as human beings. And they're more sensitive than ever to actions of leaders. And people are looking for their leaders to listen through actions. And what I mean by that is, are your leadership actions matching what you say is important? So as an example, do you say it's really important to the company that we support all of you, but yet, for example, you demand that everybody shows up? That was happening a lot, and still is in certain cases.
Yeah, I see it happening a lot too. I mean, it's a big thing that crosses my desk, which is people are, I'm hearing the word burnt out pop up a lot. So 5 weeks ago, you didn't hear the word burnt out. You heard a lot of words like uncertainty, unprecedented times, change, and stress and anxiety. But now we're hearing, call it the aftermath of some of this stuff, which is being burnt out. And I think, to your point, I don't know if people know how to balance their own time, because, even for team members, how do they now manage some of the expectations of their leaders? So if their leaders are not being compassionate, if they are still measuring things in some of the previous metrics or all the ways they were doing it, what advice do we give people, or how does that team member bring something up? Should they bring something up?
Yeah. And you bring up a really good point, which is the fact that right now we need to have the courage to adapt metrics that we can't hold on to any longer, or to metrics that aren't actually serving us right now. So as leaders, we need to recognize what are those metrics and what do we need to adapt. And we need to have the courage to be the ones to say, we are going to adapt this. So as an example, a leader that we work with talked to her team saying, you know what, you're not working from home right now. You're working through a global pandemic from home. It's significantly different. And I promise you, as soon as she said that, collectively, the group exhaled, because they recognized she was showing through her actions that she had compassion and understanding that they were trying to operate in a different time and with different bandwidth. So she gave permission, not to bad performance. She gave permission to being human and being real, and saying, let's support each other and recognize what each other are doing. That's working, right? And having the context to actually look up and see, to your point about burnout, see what's happening for people. So even as an example with the sales team, sorry, I'll let you jump in.
No.
With the sales team, right? Like, we were talking about one particular company that was still pushing their people to, where are you making all of your calls? And what are your metrics? Those are outdated metrics. And you know what? That leader may think they're supporting their team through pushing them, but it's actually, it's creating a divide and a fissure between the relationship, because that leader is saying to their team, they don't either get what's going on or they don't care. So they're sticking to outdated measurements.
Yeah.
It needs to be updated to, what phone calls are you making to maybe connect with people from a relationship standpoint, not from a sales standpoint.
But we know that people will revert back into what their pattern or what they've done in the past. So, these leaders right now, in a lot of cases, all they are unconsciously doing is squeezing, because that's the only thing they know how to do. Is, if I squeeze for results, if I push for these results, if I hold the line, if I keep pushing them, they're going to get the results. And I think everything that you're talking about is that's a fool's game, which is, in their effort to squeeze or to push, they are going to get the opposite response or reaction, or even worse outcome, right, or result.
Yeah.
So what should leaders be looking out for? Because I wanted to ask you this before. So we started talking a little bit about burnout, and like, are there signals, are there signs that leaders can look out for when they are Zooming or talking to teams and individuals? Things to pay attention to.
So there's a number of things for us to talk about in that vein, actually. And one of, well, let's start actually with the concept of psychological safety, because psychological safety actually underpins all of the then to-dos. Okay. So psychological safety is exactly how it sounds, which is how safe do people feel with you? How safe do people feel to speak up, to share their ideas, to tell you that something's going wrong? Okay. And Google, as reported by the New York Times, did a significant study a couple of years ago, and it was a 4-year study where they studied what is the difference between their high performing teams and the teams that didn't perform quite so well. It's a very famous study by this point. And the only and the most significant difference is that the high performing teams had a sense of psychological safety amongst themselves and with their leader. So what's interesting about that is even a company as high performing as Google, where you might think that everybody operates at a super high level, they had issues with psychological safety, even like again amongst those super smart people. And it underpins the importance of psychological safety. So the relevance of that is, especially now during these uncertain times, your team's psychological feeling of safety will make or break performance results.
So in some regards, that's what we should be measuring and looking for in everything that we do moving forward, which is, if I was to maybe sort of put a measurement to that, sort of 1 out of 10, ask myself as a leader each day, where does my team sit on that scale? And in some cases, maybe even ask them, which might be a difficult question to answer.
No, that's it. Like, okay, because here's the thing, psychological safety, it's an emotion. Right? It's just like trust is an emotion. There's not really an instruction book for psychological safety per se, or even trust. But, there are ways to somewhat quantify it, but it is individual. So you bring up the exact point, is how my people are feeling is actually going to make or break how they accept my leadership. And their feeling is going to be individual. So absolutely, we want to ask questions. I was having a coaching conversation with somebody in Washington last week. And, he was saying, he's like, I'm killing myself trying to be there for all of my team members. They call me all the time to talk about how hard things are, or they call me to tell me what they don't agree with what we're doing. And he's like, I'm dying here. But he said, the hardest part for me is I have no idea how I'm doing from their perspective. And so we talked about just exactly that concept. Maybe you should ask them.
Well, it sounds like if his team is opening up and emotionally expressing and being vulnerable, they by definition feel safe to do so, particularly having conversations about their stresses and challenges with either their job, their team, the administration right now, which we know is a big conversation, right?
Can I jump in for one sec?
Yeah.
Because you bring up a really good point, and if we connect it back to high performers or those leaders who tend to squeeze, the challenge with those type of leaders is that they'll also squeeze up for themselves. He's also beating himself up a bit because he wishes he had more answers. So the point was, then ask your people, how am I doing? What does support look like for you? Because there's also a big disconnect for people as to what does support look like. So as a leader, you're not expected to have all of the answers. But as we've talked about, to be effective, you are expected to be somewhat compassionate and intelligent. So why not say to your people, look, what does support look like for you? How could I support you more? How am I doing? And here's what I'm trying to do for you. Because the other thing him and I talked about was he's working really hard to bring as much information to them as possible. Because as we know, things are changing daily. So even the simple concept of announcing that at a team meeting. Yep. Hey, everyone, I'm wanting to give you some insight is here's what I'm trying to do to support you. Because the other thing we know is when people are swirling, they don't always make the connection between what people are trying to do as a leader and how it's being received.
Absolutely. And looping them in, I think, has been a big conversation I've been having with people lately, which is just tell them that you're thinking about it and you don't have an answer and you're trying to figure it out yourself. At least that's better than saying nothing at all. And it's involving people, and by definition, that's demonstrating vulnerability and transparency. And I think those are two of the most important, I don't even want to call them skills, but behavioral things that we could be demonstrating right now as leaders. And not just because we're in this crisis right now, because this is what's going to be required for us moving forward. We need to be able to sustain our ability to be vulnerable and compassionate and transparent.
And I'd add to your description, courageous. You know,
Yep.
you're actually quite verbal, and you're also pretty good at saying I don't know. Not every leader is comfortable saying that.
Yeah.
So people need to recognize it does take courage to say I'm not quite sure. And in this current landscape, to your point, people would rather you say I'm not sure, but I'm looking into it, rather than saying nothing at all.
Yeah.
Because,
Sorry, go on.
oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I find another line that helps is, you know what? It's okay to change your mind. In other words, you know, while you've made a decision, let's say someone brings up a different idea, it's okay to say, you know what? I didn't actually think about that. That is a great idea. Or I don't know. Right?
Yeah.
There's this need, I think, that leaders put on themselves, or this pressure that leaders put on themselves to be in the know, particularly while it's going through. And, you know, again, crisis management isn't done by supplying people with answers. It's by being available and involved and sharing information in real time. This is the same reason the premier and the president are standing up on a daily basis, giving an announcement.
Yeah, exactly. And here's the thing too, with leadership and psychological safety and being courageous, is that leaders go first. So to be a leader, you go first. You're the one who says, here's what I think, here's what we're going to try. It may not work. And if it doesn't work, they're the first ones to say, that didn't work. Now we need to pivot. We're going to do this. Same with the component of psychological safety and vulnerability, to your point. It's the leader first who says, look, I'm sorry if what happened yesterday was uncomfortable for you. That's not how I meant things to come across, right? So I think too, right now in this time, as people, I talked about the finite energy, and as people are struggling, they're contracting rather than expanding.
Yeah, I noticed that too. I noticed a lot of people, we might change the word contracting to withdrawing, or it's taking a toll on them internally. And I think leaders, back to, we were talking a little bit about it before, which is what do we need to look out for? Yes, there's the standard stuff like people's energy levels, right? But maybe we need to change the metrics, that if we're starting to see performance things slip, that's a signal for us to lean into the human being versus the project or the system. Because if that individual, something has shifted, like they're not able to perform anymore, it's most likely due because they're battling right now. So, you know, you don't need to be a therapist trained to look for things. You need to be observant and kind.
Yeah, you're so right. And the observant is a key part, because not everybody is going to admit that they are struggling. It's especially, I don't know if you're finding this too in your conversations, but because there have been a lot of layoffs with people who are still left to deal with a lot of functions that still need to happen, people are fighting for their spot within a team, and there's a lot of posturing that's going on. So people wanting to make sure they're getting credit for what they do. Right? And they're maybe not going to want to admit to their leader that they're struggling because they don't want to seem weak.
Right.
So
Right. And people are worried about their economic survival. So if a team member stands up and, you know, look, this is affecting my household. I mean, I've got, you know, friends and family that are going through this exact thing, which is they are overwhelmed and they just don't know how to approach the leader to say, I'm struggling right now, because there is fear that, well, if you're not doing what I'm doing, you're going to be out. And it's a reality for people. I think it's a perception people need to challenge. I think the advice, and I'm sure you would say this as well, you would rather go and ask to have the conversation than not say it at all.
I agree that team members do have a responsibility for having the conversation. Absolutely. And to be able to ask for what they want and need. I think because we're in such challenging times, there's more responsibility on leaders to, like I said, go first.
I agree. Totally agree with that.
To observe, like you said, the powers of observation need to come into play, because people may not tell you what's going on, because, you know, to that point, if there's going to be another round of layoffs, I don't want to seem like the weak link. So I'm going to hold it all together. And, you know, but the challenge of that is I'm only accessing so much of my potential, because the rest of my potential is dealt with coping.
There's a lot of resources out there for mental well-being right now. which I would also sort of, tell leaders to get their hands on as many apps, resources, papers, emails, links, and just start, absorbing yourself into the world of what does a healthy human being looks like emotionally and mentally, and paying attention. Again, I think back to some key qualities leaders can demonstrate right now. You didn't say this, but I'll paraphrase it, which is again, really recognizing and paying attention to what is going on with this person in front of you above and beyond the standard conversation or meeting or email, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes, and that there's such an opportunity to build a relationship with each other that's deeper than just the professional one.
Yeah.
And it is on the leader to have the observations and ask the great questions. And you and I, when we were involved in some of our webinars with some of our key clients, we noticed that when we asked different questions, people opened up more.
Absolutely.
Right? So the difference between how are you doing, which we automatically say, oh, good, 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 versus what's your level of anxiety this week?
Mm-hmm.
What's challenging right now in your household? Are you comfortable sharing? What can I do to help?
Mm-hmm.
Allowing the time and space for those conversations, it actually gives people permission to open up.
Yeah. I think people have, particularly leaders, there's been such an emphasis on connecting one-on-one and doing your team Zooms and stuff. I think, we would remind leaders that that's just not an exercise you do to check the box to say, oh, I've done my one-on-ones through Zoom or I did my weekly team kickoff with them. The reason we are doing this is to give ourselves opportunity to see what's going on with that person and be able, as their leader, to make adjustments for them. Because as you said, we need to measure the emotional health of the person before measuring the deadline or the metrics of the project.
Absolutely. And, even in coaching athletes, it's why they call it the art and science of coaching, because you can have your best laid plan for how you're going to prepare an athlete for nationals or worlds or the Olympics. But if that athlete shows up that morning and you can see the look in their eyes, they're exhausted, they just can't string things together. At some point, you're an idiot if you stick to a plan that's not working.
Yeah.
So we need to be able to be adaptable, and we need to open our eyes and see what's in front of us and adapt our plan accordingly. It doesn't mean you just give up. It means that you intelligently and consciously adapt, and you only squeeze where appropriate, and then you support. There has to be the blend.
Yeah, you used a descriptor earlier where you called it modern agility. Is this what you're talking about?
So modern agility, meaning that right now, more than ever, people are dying for human connection. So the modern agility in the relationship economy is looking out for where can I connect with and support other human beings. So just like what we teach, the connection first, then the objective. That's the magic to be able to connect with a human being and move them towards action. You brought up another point before about what can we do to help support people? So we've talked about being observant and connecting. And the other part I wanted to talk or link on to what you talked about there was that the opportunity for us right now is there's a potency to the connection. So
yes.
I would agree with you that the time we spend authentically connecting with people is going to go way farther than it might in other times. And I say that as a form of also motivation for people, because what I'm finding right now is people are tired, and this is turning out to be a marathon, not a sprint. So if you can also remind yourself that me connecting with somebody and taking that extra 15 minutes or whatever, talking on a walk, it's going to have more impact than it might later. So it's worthwhile doing.
Yeah. On that note, sometimes even not Zooming, but having a phone call on a walk is more powerful than sitting down with that Zoom, right? I think there's so much pressure for us to see each other's faces now that, sometimes we're Zooming at the inappropriate times. But the point of it and what you're describing is the effort we need to put into connect, to keep the connection going, to deepen the connection, to deepen the relationship, to learn more about the person, to be invested in their life.
Yeah, and to give them some autonomy and some flexibility in terms of how they get things done for work. That's another important component.
Mhm.
And I know you've been really great with that with us in terms of, okay, we're going to do some times where we connect, but outside of that, if people need to take time off to teach their kids or whatever, it's accepted and it's supported.
Right.
Because again, when we talk about the talk needs to blend with the actions, and we need to listen through action. I keep hearing about companies who say they understand, but then they schedule Zoom calls through lunch, or they do a cocktail hour at 6 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
That is not demonstrating you're listening through the actions.
Mm-hmm.
It's up to leadership to put some, parameters around what people can do, and give people an option to say, you know what, Greg, maybe today you can do whatever, 5 out of the 6 calls. Like, you tell me what works.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
treating them like human beings.
Yeah. I think a big question that I try to remind myself of, particularly with the group, is like, what are you doing this week? Hey, what's going on in your life? What are you working on? Because look, again, business has changed. There is a different way about going about it. Look, you talk a lot about this, which is the importance of restoring restoration, which is, taking time to get recharge, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the truth to it right now is I don't think people have that time, because we are always on. As you said, we're always on in our relationship, or as a parent, or as a team member, or as a leader. And every time you're sort of dropping one activity, you're turning the other one on. And it's 24/7 because we are locked away in these environments.
Yeah, you're so right. And I hear that a lot too. And people feel like they're never leaving work.
Right.
There's not the physical distancing either.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got to find ways to help people build that in. It's like, we've been saying to one particular team member, go for a walk. It's okay. I don't need to see you at this time,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like helping people to build in some sort of a separation so they feel like they have some resource.
Yeah, and that's a really good sort of a tidbit for everyone, which is make sure your office space or professional space is separated from, call it, your family space. Because when you're sitting at the dining room table and the kids and the spouse and everyone's around and all that kind of stuff, there is no physical separation. So it's like as you said, you're never leaving the office. So
Mm-hmm.
I highly recommend to people that, like, whether even if you go into the basement into like your furnace room, if that's all you've got, right? Or if it's a second bedroom, or if it's just you're scheduling the house differently, where you say sort of between these hours, the main floor is sort of, the professional floor. It's really important to be able to create physical separated space, because it's hard to emotionally separate when you can't physically separate.
Yeah, I don't know what it was like for you when you went to university, but I'm saying to people, pretend it's like you're in university where there's 4 of you in a house, and one guy had a room that was just made with a shower curtain.
Right.
Usually it's that person who got the most lucky. So we made it happen then, we can make it happen now.
So this was actually sent to me, a TED Talk the other day from a client, which you well know. And it reminded me that there's been for a very long time a standard assessment that allows us to measure our self-care. And it's done in 5 categories. So the first category is physical self-care. So what are you doing to look after yourself? I mean, you're an Olympian and coach, so like you're a runner, like you have a physical regimen to your self-care. You're seeing a lot of people buy the Peloton right now, right? A lot of people are buying the Mirror, which is, I think, a really cool product as well, which is, getting people to exercise and stuff like that. I'm lucky, I'm a swimmer, that's me. But we also said something pretty simple a little while ago, where I was also talking to another client, where they said just the effort of getting up and moving between Zooms, standing up from your desk, taking a walk for 7 minutes. I mean, there's a ton of research and stats out there that show you that, like, unless you're getting up after that hour or hour and 15 minutes, it's not healthy. So physical self-care is really important. The next is the world that you and I live in, which is the psychological and the emotional self-care, right? Which is, are you doing things to look after your mental well-being, your emotions? They can be broken into 2 separate categories, but I think they kind of go hand in hand. There's spiritual self-care, which is if you are a spiritual individual, that could also be things like maybe not from a religious standpoint, but from maybe like a meditative standpoint, right? But what are you doing to look after your spirituality? Your relational or your social self-care. So what are you doing to look after the relationships around you? And I like to look at this pretty simply, which is, you know, if you're hanging around with shitty people and toxic people, you don't feel very good, right? So it's not just about what you do for your relationships, it's about what your relationships are doing for you. Do they contribute to your well-being and your rest and type of stuff, right? It's like a really good partner or spouse, which is, hey, honey, let me take this on for you because I know you need to sort of rest, right? And then finally, which I think is really interesting, is professional self-care. And this is what we're talking about now, which is, you know, the importance of us as leaders to ensure that our team members are being taken care of in their professional worlds. And it's really hard right now between the pressure of trying to be successful in this economy and run the business and make sure the business is making the right decisions, and the pressure or the expectation we're putting on people. And look, I battle with it in the sense that I'm a business leader, and I, you know, there's the right and the wrong, or there's the question of how do you balance this. But then there are corporations or organizations out there that aren't recognizing that it's their responsibility to look after the team members' well-being, which includes their professional expectations.
Yeah, well, and you know, even in the title of it, professional self-care, it's actually combining care with professional, which anoints the term in a very powerful way. So I've never heard it described that way, but I love it because, again, it does give permission and responsibility to, if we're dealing with professionals and we want them to level up, we have a responsibility to care. And, you know, one of the things I'm also seeing is that there's so much support and power in teams right now. And we know everybody needs their tribe, right? And right now, our tribes are more important than ever because we're really relying on each other. And in the sporting world and in the corporate world, we build resilience individually, but also in teams. So there's this opportunity to say, okay, for our professional self-care, who can do what? Who's got an expertise in what? And you know what? We don't have to all be excellent every day. I could be, maybe I'm feeling excellent today and maybe tomorrow I'm not. But because you're on my team, you'll be like, it's okay, JD, and I got it. There's reprieve and calmness in knowing I don't have to do it all the time by myself.
You know, I remember an exercise that I used to do in one of these peer groups when I was a member of them, but you would give yourself a rating each time you sat down with the group, which is how are you doing professionally, how are you doing personally, and how are you doing in your health. And you could change the categories, but as you were talking, it just reminded me that's a really good tip for all the leaders out there that, you know, start your meetings with, hey, what number are you at today? Right? And you can make it energy or happiness or, you know, psychological self-care. Like, hey, where are you at today? Oh, I'm at a 2. Oh, what's going on? I'm really fucked up right now. All right, well, tell me more about that, right? And then someone else in the team says, okay, well, let me handle this for you while you go and deal with what you need to deal with. It is this multi-layered approach where it's not just on the leader to keep driving this, but it's for us as individual team members to step up within our leadership roles and contribute well to the other individuals within that team.
Absolutely. And when we say leaders go first, it doesn't have to just be the leader, right? It's the leadership capability in all of us to go first to say, you know what, like to your point, I'm not feeling so great today. Can somebody take this for me, right? And in high performing teams, what we know through research is that a really great team, whoever is holding the torch does shift, because it gives people different exposure to different styles and carrying the weight.
Yeah, I like the analogy of a relay race, right? You're handing off the baton just to run that next section and it'll eventually come back around to you.
Yeah, and the other thing right now too is we need to be careful in assuming. We can't assume people either know how we're doing, right? Because we're not very good at showing it. And we also need to not assume that what we're doing is the right thing. Because I don't know about you, but I've had conversations with people where a leader will feel like, oh, I'm saving all these people from not having to do this. Meanwhile, middle management is like, oh, but even getting to do something towards this project makes me feel like I have a place. So we need to keep asking the questions, and even for middle managements to say, hey, are you aware that when that happened, this is how it made me feel? Would it be okay if I shared with you the impact that that meant for me? What was the intention, right? So continuing to have conversations and not making assumptions, or at
And
least negative assumptions.
yeah, I was going to say, and as a leader, like, people are not going to be good having these conversations. They're gonna fumble it as they're trying to have it. So just be very careful about starting to hammer them from that critical standpoint, and starting to look at, well, oh, they're fumbling right now, but at least they're trying to have the conversation, and then really putting yourself in a position to seek understanding and to take the pressure off of you to help them, but to just be patient enough with them that they could get a little bit of wind in their sails, or they could catch their footing, and they could
Yeah.
then start to communicate.
Yeah, you're so right. And I keep thinking right now, patience is wisdom.
Yes.
Just have patience with people, have patience with business metrics,
Hmm.
have patience with yourself,
Hmm.
right? And the one thing I would add to the self-care is the self-compassion,
Yes.
because people are raw and everybody's making mistakes.
Hmm.
So there's a great opportunity for our relationships, and our relationships will get stronger the more we forgive each other.
I agree with that. And just back to the self-compassion and self-care. In this self-care assessment, one of the things that we just want to emphasize is it's really important that you as the individual are doing this for yourself. Let's say you are the leader, you're doing this for yourself. So you have enough energy, you have enough sort of fuel in the tank to be able to hold it together. And the way you get there is by giving yourself some permission to have days where you don't have to hold everything up. Your team will hold you up.
Hmm. Yeah, it's so true. And most teams are happy to take that torch. It's like,
I think so.
sure, thank you. I would love to, because one of the main psychological needs we know people have is autonomy, the ability
Yeah.
to make decisions. And when people talk about, I need to see the team being more accountable, well,
Mhm.
how about we give them an opportunity for autonomy, and then we'll see how accountable they'll naturally become.
Yeah, I've defined that even a little bit further. One of the things people need to be a part of right now, one of the primitive needs people have, is contribution, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Contributing to the pack, to the community, to the greater good, to the bettering, right? And you can help people by giving them that autonomy to take things on. Some people want to feel purposeful. In fact, the majority of us want to feel purposeful right now. I'm a really shitty teacher, so I'm kind of screwing that up with my kids, but I know I can kill it on this project in this capacity, and that's going to build my self-esteem. And as my self-esteem builds, I'm going to feel better. I'm going to now parent better, and it's just going to be this positive ripple effect or circle that starts to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And we need that. We need things to grab onto.
Right. Okay, Jadine, as usual, you're amazing. I thought today was a really nice conversation. We're going to do this again and again because we got some more stuff to talk about, and we want to give these sort of conversations or these concepts in small enough doses that people can take, and, as you famously say, go and implement on a micro action level, which is just try these little things each and every day. Just 1% each day over a period of time is going to allow for a bigger amount of change. So again, you're awesome. There's another piece to this, which is you give an analogy of a plant. So help us understand how we could think about a plant as leaders.
Yeah. So when we consider a plant, and I have to caveat this by saying I'm actually a very good people person. I'm terrible with plants. But anyway, when you consider a plant, if a plant is starting to struggle, we don't typically just throw out the plant. We consider what are the parameters that are affecting the plant. So is the plant getting enough water? Too much water? Is it getting enough sunshine? So we naturally consider the impact of the environment on the health of the plant. And we do that so easily with plants. We don't do it so easily with human beings. So the invitation is to consider the impact of the ecosystem and the environment on your people and on the plant. So don't be so quick to throw people away. Let's adjust the environment, and now more than ever, so that the people can thrive.
Awesome. And I think that is a great sort of recap or way to sort of, end today's show, which is you know, everything we spoke about and everything that you spoke about, Jadine, today is so important for us as leaders, because there is no more important time, or there couldn't be more of an important time for us to actually show up as leaders. And, you know, I've said this before, you've said this before, which is, you know, everything we've learned as leaders, everything we've been doing up until this time is now for us to now start to use. It's almost like we've been practicing. We've been in the locker room for so long, and now we're in the game. Now we're in the field, and it's being able to recall these things in the moment. And what I loved about what you spoke about today was all around sort of making sure that, you know, we as leaders are doing the things to make sure that people are emotionally well and looked after. And if we do that, they're going to thrive in their performance. And there's ways to get there, very easy ways. So as usual, Jadine, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us today. We've got some more shows coming up where we're going to get you back and have some different topics, which we're excited for. But as usual, the effort is to make humans better humans, and hopefully today shared a little bit of insight and tools to do so. So if you're on YouTube, don't forget to click subscribe. Don't forget to like that video. Don't forget to add in your comments. If you want to see any ideas, or if you have any ideas for future topics, please send us a message and we would love to talk on that. Until then, we will see you next time.
Hey, I'm Greg Witz. Thanks so much for coming and checking out the video. If you like that video, you're going to love the next one. So I'd highly suggest that you click this video over here. And don't forget to subscribe and share.